"Jacob, don't drink from that cup. I saw her put something in it," screamed 12-year-old Emily as her father reached for the coffee. Tension hung in the quiet kitchen of the Seattle suburb. What was behind the perfect smile of Jacob's new wife, Caitlin? On this chilly fall evening, one casual phrase has revealed a secret that could destroy their family. But will he believe his daughter, or is it just a childish fantasy? The cool October air hung heavy over the quiet suburbs of Seattle, carrying with it the faint rustle of fallen leaves and the promise of something unspoken. In a modest but cozy house on the edge of town, Jacob Clark sat at the kitchen table, his broad shoulders hunched slightly as he stared into the steam rising from his coffee mug. The soft glow of a single lamp bathed the room in a warm, golden hue, casting long shadows that danced across the pale blue walls. At 42, Jacob was a man who wore his years lightly. His dark hair was streaked with hints of gray, and his hazel eyes still held a spark of resilience despite the grief that had shadowed his life for the past 4 years. Across from him sat his 12-year-old daughter, Emily, her small frame perched on the edge of her chair. Her chestnut curls framed a face that seemed too perceptive for her age, with wide, expressive eyes that flickered with a mix of curiosity and unease. She poked at her scrambled eggs with a fork, her movements slow and deliberate, as if her mind were elsewhere. Jacob noticed her distraction but said nothing. He'd grown used to her quiet spells since her mother, Sarah, had passed away from cancer. That loss had carved a hollow space in their lives, one they'd both learned to navigate with a fragile, unspoken understanding. The kitchen was silent save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of a spoon against ceramic. It was a Sunday morning, the kind Jacob cherished, a rare chance to slow down from his demanding job as an accountant and simply be with Emily. He'd even planned a lazy day, breakfast together, maybe a walk through the nearby park to watch the leaves fall. It was a small attempt to rebuild the warmth their family had once known. But that warmth had shifted in recent months, ever since Caitlin walked into their lives. Caitlin, Jacob's new wife, moved through the kitchen with a grace that seemed almost rehearsed. At 35, she was striking, tall and slender, with sharp cheekbones and piercing green eyes that could disarm anyone with a single glance. Her auburn hair was swept into a flawless updo, and her tailored sweater hugged her frame just so. She'd been a whirlwind romance for Jacob, a chance encounter at a coffee shop that turned into late-night conversations, and, eventually, a proposal. To him, she was a second chance at happiness, a way to fill the void Sarah had left behind. To Emily, though, Caitlin was an enigma, a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. "More coffee, honey?" Caitlin's voice broke the silence, smooth and syrupy as she held up the pot. Her lips curved into a smile, but there was something practiced about it, something that didn't reach her eyes. Jacob nodded, pushing his mug toward her. "Thanks, Kate," he said, his tone warm but tired. "You're spoiling me this morning." "It's what I'm here for," she replied, pouring the dark liquid with a steady hand. She glanced at Emily, her smile tightening just a fraction. "And you, Em? How's your breakfast?" "Fine," Emily mumbled, barely looking up. She stabbed at her eggs again, her fork scraping the plate. Caitlin's presence always made her feel small, like she was being watched too closely. There was a coldness to her stepmother, a sharpness that lingered beneath her polished exterior. Emily couldn't explain it, but it prickled at the back of her neck like a warning she couldn't ignore. Caitlin turned back to the counter, humming softly as she prepared her own cup. Jacob sipped his coffee, oblivious to the subtle tensions simmering in the room. For him, this was progress, a new family taking shape, a chance to give Emily the stability he feared he couldn't provide alone. He'd always felt the weight of being a single parent, the gnawing doubt that he wasn't enough. Caitlin had promised to change that, to bring light back into their home. And for a while, it seemed like she had. But Emily saw things Jacob didn't. She'd noticed the way Caitlin's eyes lingered on her father when he wasn't looking, not with love, but with something colder, something calculating. She'd caught the fleeting moments when Caitlin thought no one was watching, a smirk that vanished as quickly as it appeared, a glance toward the door as if she were planning an escape. And now, as Caitlin stood at the counter, Emily's gaze sharpened. Her stepmother's movements were too precise, too deliberate. She reached into her pocket, casually, almost invisibly, and pulled out a tiny vial. With a quick flick of her wrist, She tipped its contents into Jacob's mug, the faint puff of powder dissolving into the coffee before anyone could notice. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her fork clattered against the plate, the sound jarring in the stillness. Jacob looked up, startled, his brow furrowing. You okay?" he asked, setting his mug down. Her heart pounded, a wild drumbeat in her chest. She stared at the mug, then at Caitlin, who had turned back with that same practiced smile. The words tumbled out before she could stop them, her voice trembling but fierce. "Jacob, don't drink from that cup," she cried, her eyes wide with panic. "I saw her. She put something in it." The room froze. Jacob's hand hovered over the mug, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. Caitlin's smile faltered, just for a heartbeat, before she recovered, tilting her head with a soft laugh. "Emily, sweetie, what are you talking about?" she said, her tone dripping with concern. "That's quite an imagination you've got." But Emily didn't back down. She pointed at Caitlin, her small hand shaking. "I saw it. You took something from your pocket and poured it in when you thought I wasn't looking." Jacob's gaze darted between his daughter and his wife, his mind racing. Emily's words hit him like a punch to the gut. Absurd, impossible, yet laced with a conviction he couldn't dismiss. He knew his daughter. She was smart, observant, not prone to wild stories. But Caitlin, the woman he'd married, the one he'd trusted to rebuild their family, the idea that she could do something sinister was unthinkable. And yet, the doubt crept in, cold and insidious, as he stared at the coffee steaming in front of him. Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low, steadying himself against the rising tide of unease. "I'm sure," she whispered, her eyes locked on his. "Please, Dad, don't drink it." The kitchen fell into a suffocating silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Caitlin's laugh faded, her green eyes narrowing ever so slightly. Jacob swallowed hard, his hand still inches from the mug. He didn't know what to believe, but he knew one thing. He couldn't take the chance. Not with Emily watching him, her face pale and pleading. Whatever happened next, this moment would change everything. The kitchen seemed to shrink under the weight of Emily's accusation, the air thick with a tension that pressed against Jacob's chest. His hand lingered near the coffee mug, the steam curling upward like a question he wasn't ready to answer. Emily's wide, frightened eyes bore into him, pleading for trust, while Caitlin stood frozen at the counter, her perfect composure cracking for the briefest of moments. The faint hum of the refrigerator buzzed in the background, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in the room. Jacob cleared his throat, forcing a calm he didn't feel. "Okay, let's not jump to conclusions," he said, his voice steady but laced with unease. He glanced at Caitlin, searching her face for some hint of truth. "Kate, what's Emily talking about? Did you put something in my coffee?" Caitlin's lips parted in a soft, incredulous laugh, her green eyes widening with a practiced innocence. "Jacob, really? You think I'd do something like that?" She stepped closer, resting a hand on his shoulder, her touch light but deliberate. "She's a kid. Kids see things that aren't there sometimes. You know how imaginative she can be." Her tone was soothing, almost maternal, but there was a tightness to it, a thread of something sharp beneath the surface. Emily shook her head fiercely, her curls bouncing with the motion. "I'm not imagining it," she insisted, her voice rising. "I saw you pull something out of your pocket, a little bottle, and dump it in when you turned away. It was white, like powder." Her small hands clenched into fists, her frustration spilling over. "Dad, you have to believe me." Jacob's stomach twisted. He wanted to trust Caitlin. God, he needed to. She'd been his lifeline these past few months, a beacon of hope after years of gray, lonely days. But Emily's certainly gnawed at him. She wasn't a liar. She'd never been one to make up stories, not like this. He shifted in his chair, his gaze dropping to the coffee. It looked normal, dark, unassuming, but the doubt was there now, a shadow he couldn't shake. "Let's just clear this up," he said finally, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Kate, how about we switch cups? I'll take yours, you take mine. No big deal, right?" He slid his mug toward her, his tone casual, but his eyes locked on hers, watching for any flicker of hesitation. For a split second, Caitlin's mask slipped. Her smile froze, her fingers tightening around the handle of her own mug. It was so quick, barely a blink, that Jacob might have missed it if he hadn't been looking. Then she recovered, her laugh returning, though it sounded brittle now. "Oh, Jacob, you're being silly. But sure, if it makes Emily feel better." She reached for his mug, her movement stiff, and pushed hers toward him. "Go ahead, drink mine. It's just coffee." Jacob hesitated, his hand hovering over her mug. He didn't want to believe Emily was right, but Caitlin's reaction, the faint tremor in her voice, the way her eyes darted to the side, set his nerves on edge. He lifted the mug to his lips, pretending to take a sip, but stopped short, watching her. Caitlin's gaze was fixed on him, her breath shallow. Then, abruptly, she set his mug down with a clatter, her hand flying to her temple. "You know what? I'm not feeling great," she said, her voice trembling just enough to notice. "I think I need to lie down. This is all a bit much." She turned toward the hallway, her steps quick and unsteady, leaving the mug untouched on the table. Emily's eyes followed her, narrow and suspicious. "She didn't drink it," she whispered, leaning closer to Jacob. "She's scared, Dad. She knows I saw her." Jacob stared after Caitlin, his mind racing. Her sudden exit didn't prove anything, but it didn't sit right either. He rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the weight of the moment settle into his bones. "Stay here, Em," he said quietly, pushing his chair back. "I'll talk to her." But Emily wasn't done. As Jacob stood, she darted to the counter, her sharp eyes scanning the space where Caitlin had been. She crouched near the trash can, her fingers brushing against something small and cold. She pulled it out, a tiny glass vial, empty, with a faint residue of white powder clinging to the inside. Her breath hitched as she held it up to the light. "Dad, look," she called, her voice trembling with urgency. "This is it. This is what she used." Jacob turned back, his heart sinking as he took the vial from her outstretched hand. It was unlabeled, unremarkable, but its presence sent a chill down his spine. He turned it over in his fingers, his accountant's mind clicking into gear, logical, methodical. "This could be anything," he muttered, but the words felt hollow. He met Emily's gaze, seeing the fear and determination in her eyes. "Okay," he said, his voice firming. "We need to figure out what this is." He grabbed his phone and snapped a photo of the vial, then slipped it into a plastic bag from the drawer. A precaution, he told himself, though his gut screamed it was more than that. "I'm calling someone," he said, scrolling through his contacts. "A friend from work, Mark. He's got a cousin in a lab. We'll get this tested." Emily nodded, relief washing over her face, but it was short-lived. She glanced toward the hallway where Caitlin had disappeared. What if she comes back? What if she tries something else? Jacob knelt beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "She won't," he promised, though he wasn't sure he believed it. "We're going to be smart about this, Em. No risks." He stood, his jaw tightening as he dialed Mark's number. The call connected, and he kept his voice low, explaining just enough to get help without sounding paranoid. As he spoke, Emily crept to the hallway, peering around the corner. She could hear Caitlin's voice, soft, urgent, coming from the bedroom. She was on the phone, her words muffled but sharp. "No, it's fine, just a hiccup. I'll handle it." A pause, then a hiss. "She's a problem, but I've got it under control." Emily's blood ran cold. She backed away, her heart pounding, and ran to Jacob just as he hung up. "She's talking to someone," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "She said I'm a problem." Jacob's face darkened, the pieces of the puzzle shifting into something he didn't want to see. He pulled Emily close, his arm wrapping protectively around her. "We're not waiting around," he said, his tone resolute. "Mark's on his way with his cousin. We test this vial, and then we decide what's next." The kitchen light flickered overhead, casting jagged shadows across the room. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows like a warning. Jacob glanced at the hallway, his mind churning with questions he wasn't ready to face. Caitlin wasn't just a stranger in their home anymore. She was a threat. And whatever she was hiding, he'd find it. For Emily's sake, he had to. The house felt smaller now, the walls closing in as Jacob stood in the kitchen, his phone still warm in his hand from the call with Mark. Emily hovered close, clutching the edge of the table, her eyes darting toward the hallway where Caitlin's muffled voice had faded into silence. The tiny vial sat sealed in its plastic bag on the counter, an unassuming shard of glass that held answers Jacob wasn't sure he wanted. Outside, the October wind howled through the trees, a restless sound that mirrored the storm brewing in his chest. "Mark's cousin will be here in an hour," Jacob said, his voice low but steady. "He's got access to a lab off the books. We'll know what's in that vial soon." He glanced at Emily, her small face pale but resolute. "You did good, Em. Finding that, it changes things." Emily nodded, but her lips pressed into a thin line. What if it's poison, Dad? What if she's trying to? She couldn't finish the sentence, her voice catching as the weight of her own words hit her. Jacob knelt beside her, his hands resting on her shoulders. Hey, look at me. We don't know anything yet. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay? But I promise you, whatever's going on, I'll keep us safe. His hazel eyes held hers, firm and unwavering, though inside, his mind was a tangle of doubt and dread. He'd brought Caitlin into their lives, trusted her, married her. If Emily was right, he'd failed his daughter in a way he couldn't forgive. The sound of footsteps snapped them both to attention. Caitlin emerged from the hallway, her auburn hair slightly mussed, her green eyes bright with a forced calm. She smoothed her sweater and flashed a smile that didn't quite reach them. Feeling better, she announced, her tone breezy. Just a little headache. Sorry for the dramatics earlier. She moved toward the counter, her gaze flickering to the empty space where the vial had been, then to Jacob, who'd subtly shifted to block it from view. Glad you're okay, he said, his voice neutral but his posture tense. Emily was pretty shaken up. Thought we could all use a breather. Caitlin's smile tightened. Kids and their imaginations, right? She stepped closer, reaching for the coffee pot. Let me make a fresh batch. We can start over. No need, Jacob said quickly, his hand brushing hers away from the counter. We're good for now. He caught the brief flash of irritation in her eyes, gone as fast as it appeared. His pulse quickened. She was testing him, probing for cracks. He needed time to think, time to get that vial tested. Caitlin tilted her head, studying him. You sure? You seem on edge, honey. Just tired, he lied, forcing a shrug. Long week. He glanced at Emily. Why don't you grab your sketchbook, Em? Draw something while I clean up. It was a signal. They'd worked out little codes over the years, and she nodded, scampering off to her room. He needed her out of the way, safe, while he figured out his next move. As Caitlin lingered, Jacob's phone buzzed. A text from Mark, on our way. Cousin says bring the sample ASAP. Meet outside in 20. Relief washed over him, but it was fleeting. Caitlin was still here, watching him like a hawk. He needed a distraction. I'm stepping out to check the mail, he said, grabbing his jacket. Be right back. Before she could respond, he slipped out the front door, the cold air hitting him like a slap. He circled to the garage, dialing Mark again. Change of plan, he whispered. I'll meet you at the corner. She's still here. Can't risk her seeing you. Mark's voice crackled through. Got it. We'll be discreet. You okay, man? Not sure, Jacob admitted. Just hurry. Back inside, Caitlin was at the sink, rinsing a mug with slow, deliberate motions. She didn't turn as he entered, but her voice carried an edge. Mail come late these days. Forgot to check yesterday, he said, keeping his tone light. Anything exciting happen while I was gone? She laughed softly, a sound that sent a shiver down his spine. Just tidying up. You know me, can't stand a mess. She dried her hands and faced him, her eyes locking onto his. Emily's a sweet girl, Jacob, but she's sensitive. Maybe too sensitive. He bristled but kept his cool. She's smart. Sees things I don't always catch. Caitlin murmured, her smile thinning. Kids can be tricky that way. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. Jacob's heart leapt, too early for Mark. He opened the door to find a delivery guy, a small package in hand. Jacob Clark? Sign here. He scribbled his name, barely glancing at the box as he shut the door. Caitlin hovered nearby, her curiosity thinly veiled. Work stuff, he said, tossing it on the table. Boring forms. It was a lie, but it bought him a moment to think. He needed her out of the room. Hey, Kate, could you grab the laundry from upstairs? I'll start dinner soon. She hesitated, then nodded. Sure, honey. As she climbed the stairs, Jacob grabbed the vial from the counter and bolted outside, meeting Mark's car just as it pulled up. Mark, a burly guy with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, leaned out the window. Beside him sat a wiry man in glasses, his cousin, presumably. Hand it over, the cousin said, taking the bag. I'll run it tonight. Sedatives, toxins, whatever's in there, we'll know by morning. Thanks, Tim, Mark said, clapping Jacob on the shoulder. You holding up? Barely, Jacob muttered. She's acting normal, but something's off. Emily heard her on the phone, saying she's a problem. Mark's jaw tightened. You need to dig deeper. Check her stuff, phone, papers. I'll call a guy I know, Ex-cop turned PI. He owes me a favor. Jacob nodded, adrenaline surging. Back inside, he found Caitlin in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a precision that felt unnerving. Laundry's done, she said without looking up. Thought I'd help with dinner. Great, he replied, his mind elsewhere. That night, after Caitlin went to bed, he crept into her office, a small room she'd claimed for personal projects. Her laptop was locked, but a drawer yielded a jackpot. A burner phone, tucked beneath a stack of receipts. He powered it on, scrolling through texts. One from an unknown number stopped him cold. Insurance payout set. Get it done soon. He's asking questions. His blood ran cold. Insurance? Sarah's policy. He'd never touched it, keeping it in trust for Emily. Caitlin knew about it, but he snapped a photo of the screen, his hands shaking. Another text. Kid's a liability. Handle her too. Rage flared, but he forced it down. He needed proof. Hard, legal proof. The vial's results would be step 1. Step 2? Confronting the woman sleeping down the hall, the one who'd smiled her way into his life only to tear it apart. The clock in the living room ticked past midnight, its steady rhythm a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in Jacob's mind. He sat in the dim glow of a single lamp, the burner phone screen still seared into his memory. Kid's a liability. Handle her too. The words looped endlessly, each repetition fueling a mix of fury and fear. Caitlin slept upstairs, or pretended to, while Emily was tucked safely in her room, oblivious to the depth of the danger Jacob now knew they faced. The vial was with Mark's cousin, its secrets hours away from being revealed, but the phone had already confirmed what his gut had screamed. Caitlin wasn't just a threat. She was a predator. He paced the kitchen, the cold tiles grounding him as he pieced it together. Sarah's life insurance, $500,000, locked in a trust for Emily until she turned 18. He'd mentioned it to Caitlin once, casually, early in their relationship. She'd nodded, sympathetic, and moved on. Now he saw it. The sympathy was a mask, the nod a calculation. She'd married him for that money, and the text suggested a plan far darker than he'd imagined. Sedate him, kill him, stage it as natural causes. Then what? Take custody of Emily and drain the trust? Or worse? His phone buzzed. Mark. PI's on it. Name's Vince. He'll dig into her past. Results from the vial by 6 a.m. Sit tight. Jacob exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Sitting tight wasn't an option. He needed evidence, something concrete to take to the police. The burner phone was a start, but it wasn't enough. Texts could be dismissed as hearsay. He needed her to slip, to admit something undeniable. A creak on the stairs made him freeze. Caitlin descended, her silhouette framed by the hallway light. She wore a silk robe, her auburn hair loose, and her expression was soft, too soft. Couldn't sleep? She asked, her voice a purr as she padded into the kitchen. You've been jumpy all day, Jacob. Just thinking, he said, forcing a tired smile. Work stress. You know how it is. He watched her closely, noting the way her eyes flicked to the counter where the vial had been. She didn't know he'd taken it. Or did she? She poured a glass of water, her movements languid. You should rest. Emily needs you sharp. A pause, then a tilt of her head. She's been off lately. All that nonsense about the coffee. Maybe she's stressed too. Jacob's jaw tightened, but he played along. Maybe. Kids pick up on things. He leaned against the table, casual but deliberate. Speaking of coffee, you seemed pretty shaken when she said that. What was in your pocket, Kate? Her hand paused mid-sip, the glass hovering near her lips. What? She asked, laughing lightly. Jacob, you're not serious. It was nothing, probably my lip balm. She's got an overactive imagination. Lip balm, he repeated, his tone flat. Funny, she was pretty specific. Said it was a vial, white powder. You sure it wasn't vitamins, or something? He kept his voice light, probing, watching her reaction. Caitlin's smile faltered, her grip on the glass tightening. Vitamins? Oh, maybe. I've been taking some supplements. Thought I'd mix them in for you. You've been so tired lately. She set the glass down, stepping closer, her eyes searching his. You don't think I'd hurt you, do you? It was a gamble, but he took it. No, I don't. But Emily does. And I've got to wonder why she'd make that up. He pulled out his phone, pretending to scroll. Found something weird tonight. An old receipt in your office, looked like a pharmacy slip. Sedatives. You never mentioned those. Her face went pale, just for a heartbeat. Before she recovered. Sedatives? Oh, that's old, from before we met. I had insomnia. You're digging through my things now. Her tone sharpened, defensive. Just tidying up, he lied, holding her gaze. But it's strange, right? That, and Emily's story. Makes you think. Caitlin's lips parted, then closed. She turned away, grabbing her glass. I'm going back to bed. You should too. This is ridiculous. But as she brushed past, he saw it, the tremor in her hand, the crack in her armor. He waited until her footsteps faded, then slipped into Emily's room. She was awake, sitting up in bed, her sketchbook open. Dad, she whispered, her eyes wide. What's happening? Stay quiet, he said, kneeling beside her. I found something, a phone she's been using. She's planning something bad, about the insurance money. We're getting out of this, but we need proof. Emily's breath hitched. I knew it. She hates me. She doesn't hate you, he said, though he wasn't sure. She's after something else. Tomorrow, we end this. He handed her his phone. Record me talking to her at breakfast. Hide it in your bag. If she slips, we've got her. Morning came too fast. Jacob barely slept, his mind racing as he set the table. Caitlin appeared, pristine as ever, but her eyes were wary. Emily sat silently, her backpack at her feet, the phone recording. Jacob poured coffee, his hand steady despite the adrenaline. Kate, about last night, he started, casual. Those vitamins, if they're for me, why not just say so? She stirred her coffee, her spoon clinking. I told you, it was a mix-up. I didn't want to worry you. Right, he said, leaning in. But you've been weird lately. Secret calls, stuff in your office. What's going on? Her spoon stopped. Secret calls? Jacob, you're paranoid. I've been planning a surprise. Your birthday's soon. A lie, and a weak one. He pushed harder. Emily heard you last night. Said you called her a problem? Care to explain? Caitlin's eyes flashed, her voice dropping. She's twisting things. I said she's sensitive, not a problem. You're letting her run this house, Jacob. She stood, her chair scraping. I need air. The phone buzzed. Mark. Vials a sedative. Lethal dose. Vince found her real name. Kate Larson. Con artist, 2 aliases, 1 dead husband. Police on standby. Your call. Jacob stood, his voice firm. Kate, don't move. He dialed 911, loud enough for her to hear. We're done. Her face twisted, panic breaking through. She lunged for the door, but he blocked her, Emily gasping behind him. You bastard, she hissed, her mask gone. You'll regret this. No, he said, as sirens wailed in the distance. You will. The police lights flashed through the windows, painting the kitchen in red and blue as officers escorted Caitlin, Kate Larson, out in handcuffs. Her green eyes burned with defiance, but her polished facade had crumbled, leaving only a raw, desperate woman in its place. Jacob stood in the doorway, his arm around Emily, who clutched his side like a lifeline. The chaos of the morning felt surreal, a nightmare unraveling in the harsh light of day. But it was over, or close to it. The lead officer, a stocky man named Ruiz, approached Jacob as the squad car pulled away. We've got enough to hold her. Attempted poisoning, fraud, identity theft. That recording your daughter made? Goldmine. She slipped up bad, admitting to the vitamins. Lab confirmed the vial. High-dose sedative. She's looking at serious time. Jacob nodded, his throat tight. Thanks. What about the insurance? Safe, Ruiz said. She forged a transfer, but it hadn't gone through. Your lawyer's on it now. He tipped his hat to Emily. Smart kid you've got. Saved your life. Emily managed a small smile, though her eyes were red from crying. I just wanted him safe, she whispered. Ruiz left, and the house fell quiet again, the weight of the past 24 hours settling like dust. Jacob led Emily to the couch, sinking down beside her. The burner phone, the vial, the texts, it was all with the police now. A tangled web of evidence that would bury Kate Larson. Vince, the PI, had uncovered more. A trail of scams across 3 states, a dead husband ruled, natural causes until now. She'd targeted Jacob for his stability, his trust fund, his vulnerability. Emily had been the wild card she hadn't counted on. Dad, Emily said, breaking the silence. How'd you know to push her like that? He rubbed his neck, exhaling. I didn't. Just trusted you. When you said you saw her, I couldn't ignore it. Then the phone, the vial, it all clicked. He pulled her close, his voice softening. You're the brave one, Em. I was blind. She shook her head, curling into him. You believed me. That's what mattered. A pause. Then, will she come back? No, he said firmly. She's gone for good. I'll make sure of it. He meant it. Lawyers, restraining orders, whatever it took. Kate had preyed on their grief, but she'd underestimated their bond. The next few days blurred. Statements, calls, paperwork. Mark stopped by with coffee and a grin. Told you Vince was good. She's toast. DA's pushing for 20 years minimum. Jacob thanked him, but his focus was elsewhere. Rebuilding, healing. By week's end, the house felt lighter. Jacob took Emily to a nursery, a spontaneous idea born from exhaustion and hope. They picked out a sapling, a sturdy maple with crimson leaves. Back home, they dug a hole in the backyard, the cool earth staining their hands. Emily patted the soil down, her face serious. It's for Mom, she said, and us. So we remember we're strong. Jacob's chest ached, but he smiled. Perfect, Em. They stood back, the tree a small, defiant mark against the chaos they'd survived. It wasn't just for Sarah. It was their victory, a root digging deep into a future Kate couldn't touch. Months later, life settled into a new rhythm. Kate's trial loomed, but the evidence was ironclad. Recordings, texts, the vial. She'd pled guilty, facing decades behind bars. Jacob sold the house, moving them to a smaller place near the Sound, a fresh start. He took up woodworking, a hobby Sarah had loved, crafting a bookshelf for Emily's sketches. She thrived at school, her confidence growing, her laughter returning. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jacob found Emily on the porch, sketching the water. "What's that one?" he asked, peering over her shoulder. She held up the page. A tree, its branches reaching high, a man and girl standing beneath it. "Us," she said simply. "We made it." He sat beside her, the air crisp and clean. "Yeah, we did." The wind carried the sound of waves, a quiet promise that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Kate had tried to break them, but she'd only forged something stronger, a family rooted in trust, resilience, and a little girl's courage.